Hello guys, Screezilla here. I hope you're all well. Well, today we've got a bit of a whopper episode coming up. So what I would suggest first of all is go make yourself a cup of tea or a cup of coffee or get yourself a drink, because this is going to be a bit of a long one to listen to me prattle on about. Today we're going to be looking at the de Havilland Mosquito, the DH98. This is without a doubt my favourite plane of all time. A magnificent machine, brilliant piece of engineering, just outstanding. So many good things about this plane. I can gush for a long time on this plane, as I'm going to. The Mosquito nearly was not a thing though. In today's episode we're going to be looking at the backstory of the Mosquito, and, well, how it nearly didn't even take off, how it nearly didn't even become a part of the war, and with that, how, well, it could have changed the outcome of the war. There are many vehicles in World War II that did have a pivotal role in the war. The Mosquito was definitely one of them. The plane was, without comparison, in Germany. There was nothing they had to catch up to it. It was one of the fastest planes of the war until the jets came along, and the Tempest and Typhoons. Even they struggled a little bit with the Mosquito. It did have a better climb rate, better speed, things like that. The sort of earlier ends of the war, and especially in 1941 when the Mosquito was first put into service. The other interesting thing about the Mosquito was it was better than a B-17 in the fact that it could carry a comparable payload to the B-17. It actually carried around about 100 pounds less bombs for longer missions. But for similar range missions, the Mosquito carried around the same bomb load as the B-17. The main thing was the Mosquito was faster, was more nimble, and it was more accurate because it could fly lower for lower altitude bomb ranges. Now, of course, this does not take into account the fact that the B-17 could carpet bomb places. It had a much more effective use in that regards. Also, the height it could fly in that sort of respect, it was able to fly above most of the flak and AAA, things like that, whereas the Mosquito flew at a lower ceiling, but it did have a much more accurate bomb ratio because of the lower altitude. So there is that little bit of information there. It's a very underrated, possibly. Not so much so, because most people do rate this plane. Most people adore it, that know of it. There is so much history involved in this plane, and we're going to be looking at quite a bit of that today, and I do apologise. So really, let's get started. I hope you enjoy your tea if you've got some. We'll start now. I'm drinking a nice chai at the moment, actually, so I will pause for a couple of sips here and then. Very professional of me, I know. But it is cold here, and I did need some tea. So, the de Havilland Mosquito, the DH-98, as its designation was known, was a British multi-role combat aircraft with a two-man crew, which served during pretty much the whole of World War II, from 1941 onwards. It was one of the few Operation Frontline aircraft constructed almost entirely of wood. The nickname the Wooden Wonder was given to it because it could do anything, really. It was multi-rolled. It had so many different uses. We'll go into some of those soon. It was also known as the Mozzie. Obviously because it's a Mosquito. Originally entered into the Air Force as a role of a fast, unarmed bomber. So originally it didn't have any armaments. It had a glass canopy at the front, and it carried a payload of around 4,000 pounds bombs. And it could carry them for around about 1,600 miles. So a pretty good range on this thing. And with the speed as well, it was pretty bloody useful. The Mosquito was quickly adapted into a number of roles after the initial light bombing role was first put into account. The roles included, now there's quite a list of these, it was low to mid altitude bomber, daytime bomber and nighttime bomber, tactical bombing, high altitude night bomber as well. Used to fly with the Lancasters, things like that for the high altitudes. It would actually take off around about 4 hours after the Lancasters took off and catch up to them over Germany, which is pretty impressive. It shows you the speed of these things. It was also a pathfinder, which means that it was used to basically go into an area sort of towards the end of the day, go in there at low altitude, fly in there as quick as it could, drop a couple of flares down or incendiary bombs around where the main bombing raids needed to happen, so that the actual bombers could find their targets at night. Pathfinder. Day and night fighter as well, and this was a big role for it. It was a heavy fighter, used for taking out bombers, things like that, intercepting, and it was also used to take out the V1 rockets as well, or doodlebugs. Sorry, I had to think that for a second. Because it was as fast, it had the same speed as the doodlebug, and it could catch up with them and shoot them out the air with a dive. So it was very useful in that respect. Along with the Typhoon and Tempest, was also used in that role. Fighter bomber, of course. Maritime strike aircraft, which is the Mark 18 version, or the Tustus. Intruder night fighter, which basically means it went over at night in front of the bombers, using radar, which we don't have unfortunately in War Thunder. I would love to have the radar systems engaged. Spots there for it. In most aircraft you'll see the panels missing, which is a real shame because I would love to have radar fights. It would be really fun to be in pitch black and having to use radar to fight people. Anyway, we won't get into that now. So the intruder fighters were basically sent to disrupt people. They were sent into areas to disrupt night fighting operations, and even bombing formations as well when they were forming up over their airfields. These would zoom in from the night sky, attack the bombers, and cause them to break formation and have issues. Photo reconnaissance aircraft as well, which was a big use of the Mosquito. Many of them were used in this role because of their superb speed, and basically nothing could catch them. They could fly over the enemy, take photos, and get out without any problems. They were also used as a light passenger plane, and also a high value cargo plane as well. They used to carry very small cargo loads, so important things like new technology, things like that, they could carry those into areas, as well as carrying a person. There are reports of them actually carrying 2 passengers at one stage in the bomb bay, which sounds terrifying, having to sit in the bomb bay area. One of the things with that is the bomb bay is taken over mainly by a fuel tank, so they had to move that slightly in the back of the plane. The Americans actually used this technique as a communications plane. They installed it with a radio operation system in the middle section there, where the fuel tanks are, just behind the pilot and the navigator. And he would sit in there with a radio, and they would fly over mainland Europe and intercept messages from spies in the area. Now the radios had a 50-meter radius of detectability by the Germans, so they're very hard to find. So these guys would sit out in the middle of the forests, Mosquitoes would fly above them, like so, in the night, get the radio, and then dash away. They'd also drop supplies, do dead drops, things like that for the area as well, and resistance fighters. They were also used by the BOAC, the British Overseas Airways Corporation, as the light cargo plane and also passenger plane, and also dropped operatives over the front line as well in high-speed drop situations, and they would come out of the bomb bay. Which again sounds bloody terrifying, just being dropped out of the bomb bay with a parachute. So yeah, a lot of uses there, and that's not even covering half of it. I think there's many more. From late 1943, Mosquito bombers were formed into the Light Night Strike Force and used as pathfinders, as said before. They also were used as nuisance bombers, dropping blockbusters on military installations, the 4,000-pound bunker buster bombs, things like that, which they would drop from a very high altitude, go through the bunker, and cause a ton of damage in the area. The big thing, though, was German fighters were unable to catch up with them, because these things were so fast. Most of the high-speed ones, for the bombing raids, things like that, were unarmed. So their main way of basically not being killed was speed and maneuverability, which the Mosquito had just had shit tons of, because they were just fantastic for it. Now I have to remove my notes here, so you will see me switching between, which is terribly unprofessional of me. The Mosquito flew with the Royal Air Force and other air forces as well in European, Mediterranean, Italian theatres. The Mosquito was also operated by the RAF in Southeast Asia as well, and the Royal Australian Air Force in Borneo during the Pacific War, during the 50s. Up to 1950, basically, was the time of the Mosquito's life. After that, it was actually replaced by the English Electric Canberra, which a little sore point in the game because they have the Canberra down the bomb line, when in fact it should be down the attacker Mosquito line. But, well, it was a bomber, so yeah, we can forgive that kind of. But I would love to see maybe the gunned version of the Canberra in the Mosquito line instead of the bomber line. Slight niggle. The first flight of the Mozzie was in 1940. Production started a year later, on the 15th of November 1941. The Mosquito was developed off a 1930 plane called the DH-88 Comet, a race plane developed by Jeffrey de Havilland. The plane won the London to Melbourne air race in 77 hours. When you think about how long it used to take to get from London to Melbourne, it was a good couple of weeks via the ship. So 77 hours was very impressive. They also used the Comets as postage planes, things like that, for getting high priority mail across the oceans, things like that. The 88 was constructed of wood. It was very similar to the Mosquito. It was a single piloted plane, so a smaller cockpit and canopy. It did look quite different, but it was very similar in the makeup, base DNA. And later the DH-91 Albatross airliner as well. The Mosquito worked off both of those, which used the wood materials and high-powered engines to basically become the fastest planes of the times. On the 8th of September 1938, the British Air Ministry issued specifications which called for twin-engine medium bombers capable of carrying a bomb load of 3,000 pounds for 3,000 miles, with maximum speed of 275 miles per hour at 1,500 feet. Sorry, 15,000 feet. Now, this basically began a massive boom in the air industry, with Avro Manchester, Handley Page, de Havilland, all of these companies starting off. Basically, this big air race to make this bomber and get the contract, of course. Geoffrey de Havilland believed, though, a bomber with an aerodynamic design with minimal skin area, so a smaller plane, not quite as big as the others, was better. Better than the specifications the British Air Ministry had actually put through. He thought that adapting the Albatross to meet the RAS requirements could save time, and actually did do this. The Albatross did have a small military run with rear, top, and front-mounted turrets, and carry a relatively decent bomb load at a relatively good speed. In 1938, de Havilland wrote to the Air Ministry, Air Marshal Winfred Freeman, the Air Council member for Research and Development, discussing the specifications and arguing that in war there would be shortages of dura-aluminium and steel, but should be plenty of wood, basically. Although inferior torsionally, so pulling, the strength to weight ratio of wood was as good as dura-aluminium or steel. So being pulled, it wasn't quite as good, but everything else it was as good as steel. And a different approach to a high-speed bomber was possible. A follow-up letter to Freeman on 27th of July said the specifications could be met by a twin-engine Merlin-powered aircraft, and either the top speed or load capacity would be compromised depending on which was paramount. For example, a large, slower turreted armed aircraft would have a range of about 1,500 miles, carrying 4,000 pounds of bombs, with maximum at 260 miles per hour at 19,000 feet, and a cruising speed of 230 miles per hour. De Havilland believed that much of a compromise and getting rid of surplus equipment would lead to a better design. De Havilland projected the performance of another design based on the Albatross, powered by 2 Merlin X engines, with a 3-man crew and 6 or 8 forward-firing guns, plus 1 or 2 manually operated guns at the tail or turret, would have a top speed of 300 miles per hour and a cruising speed of about 270. Still believing this could be improved, and after examining more concepts based on the Albatross and the new all-metal DH-95 Flamingo, de Havilland settled on designing a new aircraft that would be aerodynamically clean, wooden and powered by Merlins, which offered a substantial further development. Now, the new design would be faster than foreseeable enemy aircraft at the time, enemy fighters, and could dispense with defensive armour, which would slow it down and make interception or losses from anti-aircraft guns more likely. So when you have guns and things like that in the nose of a plane, so as we do here, it causes more weight to be at the front, and that causes, you need different aerodynamics to keep it pointing up, you need to have more power to make it moving faster, things like that. So less stuff on the plane means faster, basically. It's a bit like a race car. And because de Havilland worked on race planes, he knew this, lighter better. He also knew that a lighter plane had more manoeuvrability. So whereas a big all-metal plane, things like the Lightning, things like that, still bloody good, still bloody fast, still bloody good at moving, but they weren't quite up to the Mosquito, because they just had that bit more weight in them. So, where have I gone? Sorry, I lost my place. The lack of turrets simplified production and reduced production time, with delivery rate far in advance of competing designs without armament. The crew could be reduced to a pilot and navigator as well. Contemporary RAF design philosophy required a well-armoured heavy bomber, more akin to the German Schnell bombers, like your Ju-88s, things like that. So planes with really good armaments, usually 2 to 3 members of crew in them. You've got tail gunners, things like that, and pretty well armoured as well, so they can take good hammering from enemy fire, including anti-aircraft, things like that. So they were more of that philosophy, because they didn't believe in this lightweight, fast aircraft design. At a meeting in October of '38, Geoffrey de Havilland and Charles Walker, de Havilland's chief engineer, the Air Minister actually showed little interest and instead asked de Havilland to build wings for their other bombers as a subcontractor. On the 20th of September, in another letter to Wilfred Freeman, de Havilland wrote, "We believe that we could produce a twin-engine bomber which would have performance so outstanding that little defensive equipment would be needed." By October 4th, work had progressed to a twin-engine light bomber with a wingspan of 51 feet, and powered by Merlin or Griffin engines. The Merlin favoured due to availability, of course. October 39, a month into the war, the nucleus for of the design team under Eric Bishop moved to the security and sanctuary of a big manor called Salisbury Hall, to work on the DH-98. It was much more versatile, it had more options. Bishop made provisions for 420mm cannons in the forward half of the bomb bay under the cockpit, firing blast tubes. So, as we see here, those bits there. So the blast tubes are sort of extended bits of the cannon, which just lets the bullet pass through without any issue. And let's just see the turret, the cannons there. So this is the fighter variant. The DH-98 was really radical. The Air Minister and the Air Ministry, which wanted a heavily armoured multi-role aircraft, combined medium bomber, reconnaissance and general purpose roles, as well as capable of carrying torpedoes. With the outbreak of war, the Ministry became more receptive, but still sceptical about an unarmed bomber. it thought the Germans would be producing fighters faster than they thought, and they expected as well. It suggested 2 forward and 2 rear-firing machine guns for defence. The ministry also opposed a 2-man bomber, wanting at least a third crewman to reduce the workload of the others for a long flight. Air Council added further requirements such as remote-controlled guns, top speed of 275 miles per hour, 15,000 feet, or on 2/3 engine power, and a range of about 3,000 miles with a 4,000-pound payload. To appease the minister, de Havilland built a mock-up with gun turrets just behind the cockpit. Apart from this compromise, de Havilland made no changes. He really did not see the point in making any of these changes. On 12th of December, a meeting considering fast bomber ideas put forward by de Havilland, Blackburn and Bristol, Air Marshal Freeman directed de Havilland to produce a fast aircraft, powered initially by Merlin engines with the option of using progressively more powerful engines, including the Griffin and Napier Sabre. Although estimates were presented for a slightly larger Griffin-powered aircraft armed with 4-gun tail and a tail turret, Freeman got requirements for defensive weapons dropped, and draft equipment was raised, calling for a high-speed light reconnaissance bomber capable of 400 miles per hour. As you can see, hitting 400 miles per hour. On March 1st, 1940, Air Marshal Roderick Hill issued a contract under specification B-140, boring stuff, for 50 bombers, reconnaissance variants of the DH-98. This contract included prototypes which was given factory serial number E0234, which was the first one to fly. So let's come in for a landing and go do a proper mission in this thing. Let's move it here. Okay. So, as you can see, there was quite a bit of stuff holding this plane back. This wasn't the end of it, unfortunately. In May 1940, specifications calling for a long-range fighter armed with 20mm cannons and 4 free machine guns in the nose, de Havilland were authorised to build a prototype of a fighter version of the DH-98. It was decided after a debate that this prototype, given the military serial number of W4052, would carry where am I? Would carry the Mark 6 equipment as a day-night fighter. By June 1940, the DH-98 would be named the Mosquito, having the fighter variant kept the Mosquito project alive, basically. There was still criticism in the government and the Air Ministry for the usefulness of an unarmed bomber, even after the prototype had shown its capability. So, let's go into a battle here with the Mark 6. The construction of the prototype began in March 1940, but work was cancelled again after the Battle of Dunkirk. Lord Beaverbrook, as Ministry of Aircraft Production, decided there was no production capability for this aircraft, which was not expected to be serviced till early 1942. Although Lord Beaverbrook took Vice Marshal Freeman told Vice Marshal Freeman that work on the project should stop, he did not issue the instructions. Freeman ignored the requests, basically. And in June 1940, and basically 5 prototypes were made. Production. Hold on, let me start this again. Lord Beaverbrook and the Air Staff ordered that production focus on 5 existing types. So they wanted basically to keep up with the Supermarine Spitfire, the Hawker Hurricane, Vickers Wellington, the Armstrong Whitworth Whitley, and the Bristol Blenheim as bombers. So they didn't really want another plane in their arsenal. which put a damper on the Mosquito, but they didn't actually listen to it. Work on the DH-98 prototype did stop, seeing the project would be shut down, and when the design team were denied the materials which to build the prototype. So it was looking pretty dire for the poor old Mozzie. She was in a bit of a bad place. The Mosquito was reinstated though as priority in July 1940 after de Havilland General Manager LCL Murray promised Lord Beaverbrook 50 Mosquitoes by December 1941, and only after Beaverbrook was satisfied that Mosquito production would not hinder de Havilland's primary work of making Tiger Moths and Airspeed Oxford training aircraft, and of course repairing Hurricanes in their spare time, he sort of went on to say, look, okay, do it, but you're not going to let other work get in the way. They also have to make Merlin engines as well for other planes. Promising Beaverbrook 50 Mosquitoes by the end of 41, he was taken, de Havilland was gambling a lot because it was very unlikely they were going to make all 50 of them. But it transpired only 20 Mosquitoes were built by 1941, but the 30 were delivered in March of 42 during the Battle of Britain. Interruptions in production were, of course, a main issue because of the air raids, things like that during the time. In the aftermath of the Battle of Britain, the original order was changed to 20 bomber variants and 30 fighters. It was still uncertain whether the fighter version should have dual or single controls, or should have a turret, much like the Blenheim. They did build prototypes with turrets, things like that, but they didn't work as well. They found that the unturreted version was a much better option. It did cause some delays because they had to build stronger versions of the wings, things like that for these, but it wasn't too bad. Phew, okay, that was a bit of a mouthful. So, let's keep going here. Sorry, as I say, it's a bit of a long one today. The Mosquito has got a very interesting history to it, but it's a bit of a long one in that regard that it really was very close to being scrapped. Because it was so radical, because it was so new and strange, nobody thought it would work, and everybody laughed and scoffed at the idea of a wooden aircraft. Although wood was used in a number of manufacturing parts for aircraft, an all-wood design was not really a thing, because this was mainly wood and cloth, and, you know, it was considered outdated and useless. So, on the 3rd of November 1940, a plane codenamed E0234 was sent to Hatfield, where it started test flights. Equipped with 2 single-stage supercharger Merlins and a 3-bladed de Havilland prop. So, you see here, it's got the variable pitch prop on it, and 2 Merlins, which gives it awesome power and a great noise as well. There's actually a really good video of the Canadian Mosquito in flight, and holy crap, the noise of that thing. It's just beautiful. Deafeningly beautiful. So, where am I? 24th of November 1940, taxiing trials started, carried out by the chief test pilot, Geoffrey de Havilland Jr., which was senior son, of course, and head of the test pilot program of de Havilland. On the 25th of November, 11 months after the start of the detailed design work on the Mozzie, she took to the air for the first time. One of the fastest turnarounds from paper to air of any plane at the time. Pretty much any plane ever. It was a very big thing to have happen. So, for its maiden flight, the E0234 took off from a 450-foot airfield beside the shed which it was put together in and made, with Chief Engineer John Walker on board. The aircraft was said to handle and take off well, and reached a speed of 220 miles per hour. The only problem on her first flight was the undercarriage doors, which were attached via bungee cables to the gears, did not close properly, which is a bit of an issue. And where am I? And there was also a problem with slightly pulling to the left, which was an issue on one of the wings. They soon fixed that, but it didn't take long at all. Some changes to the airflow fixed that without any issue. January 16th, 1941, the W4050 outpaced the Spitfire at 6,000 feet. Original estimates had the Mosquito at 20 miles per hour faster than the Spitfire. However, over the next few months, the Mozzie shattered these estimates, hitting a speed of 392 miles per hour compared to 360 of the Spitfire. June 20th, W4050 recorded a new maximum speed record of 437 miles per hour at almost 30,000 feet, making it the fastest plane in the world. So it was a big deal. Basically, it showed that this wooden cloth, outdated piece of technology was just hammering it and could outpace anything at the time. Soon after these flights, W4050 was grounded and was scheduled to be scrapped, but instead they made it an instructional airframe at Hatfield. In '58, W4050 was actually returned to Salisbury Hall hangar in which it had been built, restored to its original configuration, and became one of the primary exhibits of the Havilland Aircraft Heritage Centre down in St Albans. So that's pretty much the story of Mosquito, of how it came to be. From a plane that was not going to be any use, to a plane that became one of the most useful vehicles of the war. It still amazes me how much opposition it had, because it was such a strange design, but it made it in there no problem. So, notable things for Mosquito, there are three main notable raids that I'm going to talk about today. First of all, Operation Oyster on December 6th, 1942, so just shortly after it came into service. A daylight low-level bombing raid on the Philips Electrical Company in Eindhoven, Holland. It was hoped that they would minimise casualties of this, because they basically flew in really low, really fast, and avoided as many fighters as possible with AA, which they did. They hit the factory and destroyed it without any problem. Now this was a big thing, because the factory was actually developing radar disruption technology. So if they had not hit this place, well, the Germans would have had a big advantage. So they saved a lot of people's lives, a lot of things, by taking out this this factory. And they also they had a minimal civilian kill ratio for it. Then January 1943, big one. It was the 10th anniversary of the Nazi regime's election victory, and Hermann Goering decided he was going to do a radio broadcast saying how they'd achieved air superiority over Germany, everybody was safe, they had done it all, blah 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 blah. Of course, this didn't work out too well for old Goering, because on the day, a group of Mosquitoes came in, flew in, destroyed the radio tower which Goering was transmitting through, and stopped the radio transmission. So, yeah, it didn't work out too well for him. Goering was said to say, "It makes me furious every time I see a Mosquito," remarking on the incident. He hated them because they couldn't take them down easily. These things flew with impunity over Germany. They were so fast, they were so agile, they just wreaked havoc. Then there's one of the most famous raids, which is Operation Jericho, a combined effort with RAF, RAAF, and Royal New Zealand Air Force, attacked a German prison in France, in Ames, German-occupied France. Now, the objective of the raid was to release political prisoners, basically people in the area, and they did it. They blew a hole in the wall. They blew a 10-foot hole in the wall and managed to get the prisoners escaping. Now, this was not without incident, though. The raid did cause a lot of issues because, well... Oh shit, I'm going too fast. I regret it. Crap. I should have been watching that one. I was reading my notes instead of watching what I was doing. Don't do that. Okay, well, I've ripped twice now, so I'm going well here. And not killed anybody. How hopeless of me. So, yeah, this was a big raid basically, and it was actually filmed on the camera of one of the aeroplanes as well. So this whole attack was actually recorded and used for propaganda, things like that. Let's switch to the Mark 16. Sorry, Mark 18. There was a lot of things that happened with this raid that weren't so good. A lot of prisoners were killed, and there was a lot of the SS caused a lot of deaths from it. So not the best thing, but it did help 258 escape and got a few escapees, but yeah, 102 were killed in the end with 74 wounded. So it really, it was more of a we can do this rather than we needed to. The Mosquito was also used the bouncing bombs, things like that, to go over torpedo netting. It had many uses in that regard, and it had so many variants, as I said. In game we have two variants. We have the Mark 6 and the Mark 18. The Mark 18 Tistus, as it's called, because you can name the noise of the gun, the big 6-pounder cannon that it has in front of it. So in game the Mosquito it's a good plane. I mean, it is good. It does its job really well. But unfortunately, saying that, it also has to fight some very good aircraft at the same time, which does cause a bit of problem. Because you're fighting planes that are, well, a little bit more modern, and well, the Mosquito was used tactically, not for a lot of the uses you have in War Thunder. So first of all we have the Mark 6, which is the first Mosquito you'll come to, which has 4 20mm Hispano cannons and with 150 rounds per gun, and 4 Browning 303s, capable of carrying two 250 pounds, two 500 pounds, or 8 rockets as well. So it's a really good aircraft for bomber hunting. The Mosquito attacker is really good for heavy fighter or bomber hunting. That's what I'd say for it. It's brilliant at it. It's pretty durable. Takes a good hammering before it will die, which makes it good for attacking bombers because you usually get good hammering from them. But generally you're fighting German bombers or Russian bombers. PE-8s, they're kind of hard, but everything else is not too bad. Attackers not so much, because the Mosquito doesn't have the best turn time, things like that. You do tend to struggle a bit. But the grouping of the guns in front do make a huge difference. If somebody heads on you in a Mosquito, they're usually going to die. They usually take a good pounding before they do anything to you, because there is such an arc of fire directly in front of you. The Mark 6 is more useful, in all honesty. It has more use for the game, whereas the Mark 18, it's got a 57mm cannon, which will destroy most things without any trouble. You know, you've got a huge cannon in front of it, which it's really good, but for fighting in the air, you have to be really well aimed for killing somebody with it. For fighting ground targets, you have to be spot on with it, because it's a little bit hard, because it's fires a solid AP round. You basically just tear through things. This plane was not originally intended for fighting tanks, things like that. It was actually a ship hunter. The Tistus was actually designed as an anti-ship weapon. It sank U-boats, destroyers, and even cruisers. It was capable of heavy fighting. I mean, one of the raids, it took out 4 U-boats and 5 destroyers. It also took out 7 Ju-88s as well, which is pretty impressive. But in-game, yeah, not so much, because it's just tricky having that sort of issue of being a heavy fighter with a big heavy cannon in front of you. You really have to be spot on, and you really have to have a good shot on a target before you can do much damage to them. So it's sort of a little bit a little bit disadvantaged in that regard, which makes the Mark 6 the better option, because you have got those 4 Husqvarnas. But saying that, it's still quite capable. You're still able to do quite a bit of damage if you get targets on target, which I didn't there. I suck today. Don't crash, don't crash. Oh shit. I am terrible at flying today. So yeah, you know, it's not terrible, but you have to be directly on target before you can do much. And I'm not the best at shooting with cannons. And I think that IL-10's got me. At least I managed to take him out as well. So yeah, it's... The Mosquito is a brilliant plane, but it's just so tricky in realistic battles. It's better in arcade battles for sure, but RB you tend to be pretty much a sitting duck to most things, and fighters will just rip you apart because you can't get the altitude you need for the speed advantage, and generally you don't have the arm that you need to go head on and things like that. As I say, it's a bit of a problematic thing. I mean, War Thunder is very tricky in that regard anyway. So, yeah, you know, if it was able to be used for its intended purposes, it would absolutely annihilate things. But unfortunately, being that, it's kind of a hard plane to use sometimes, as we've seen today. Mainly because I'm a crap pilot, but it just has that sort of disadvantage in that regard. But where it does have advantages in realistic battles, things like that, it's quite good for ground battles, things like that. It's quite a handy plane to have in that respect, and it's also really good for enduring conflicts. If you ever get the enduring conflict events, the Mosquito is probably my favourite plane for it, because you've got a huge amount of ammo, you've got a great fuel load, and you can sort of work it how it was meant to be worked. So that's really it for today. I hope you've enjoyed the video. I hope you've not got bored by me talking so much about this plane, and I hope you found it informative. I'll be back again soon with a new plane, probably going to be a bit shorter than this one, in all honesty. Please like, comment and subscribe, and also please give any feedback you'd like below. Keep well, screws that out, and sorry for my piss poor flying today.